what really is critical thinking and major components of critical thinking skills, and how can we integrate critical thinking skills in teaching learning, the challenges in teaching critical thinking skills, then critical thinking skills, measuring instruments for research, if some of us are interested in doing research, and in the end, some comments, questions and responses. In the very beginning, let me tell you that I'm a little bit anxious about how this is going to be, because I haven't done many online presentations. I'm a kind of an old-fashioned classroom kind of a teacher. I would love to receive interactions from you. So in order to avoid the monotony of one-man, one-way talking, what we're going to do is halfway through, we will break for some comments from you, comments and your responses, your feedback, and you want to share a bit of your story, your experiences, your perspectives. Questions we will take in the end, but your comments and responses we will break in the middle, and we will ask Revati to relate to us comments and responses. So I would certainly encourage you to make comments on what I'm saying. If there are things that you disagree with and why you disagree with, if there are things that you agree with, well, be generous in making your comments. But the questions will be in the end. My presentation is going to be a practical approach from my experiences of teaching both here in India and also my own educational experiences on the other side of the world in the US. Here we go to the first part. Why critical thinking? It said that 75% of employers in India claim that the graduates they hire lack critical thinking and problem solving skills. And if we ask why that happens, some say it is a lot more than 75%. I believe the problem with our system is even now predominantly our pattern of learning is rote learning, content recall. We have this top-down approach in teaching learning. The teacher is everything in the class, one-way talking. If there is a 1-hour class, you talk for 15 minutes. And so because it is a one-way process, top-down, teacher teaches and others, teacher dictates and others take notes, the students take notes, there is a problem, because that doesn't really result in critical thinking. And so absorbing information without understanding, without analyzing and critiquing, that pattern of education in very especially at the higher education level is not what is really expected. And so it's important for us to move from content recall to critical thinking and competence. We certainly need to enable our students to own up their learning. I'd also joined the presentation yesterday from Dr. Verma, and he was talking about the famous Bloom's taxonomy. In most cases, our learning, I believe, stops with the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, remembering and understanding, and it stops there. Not going to higher levels of teaching learning. High levels certainly involve application, analysis, evaluation, and creation. And so if we stop at the lower levels, then we stop learning. And as faculty members, our job is certainly to help our students to really own up their own learning. Open their minds is the job that we have. And I grapple with this question so often. Is this, we call this higher education. Is it actually higher education, or is it deeper education? very significant question, that is it higher education or deeper education? The higher we move in our education, the deeper must be our understanding. Now, looking into the history of higher education all over the world, very especially in our country, there has been this shift in the original purpose of education. Now, prior to the Industrial Revolution, of course, at that time, education was merely a privilege of the elite. Education was not available to the common world out there. But the primary purpose of education was actually to prepare responsible citizens. Character formation was the purpose of education. Education was for learning virtues and living a virtuous life. Education was to think clearly, independently, and courageously, express one's opinion, and learn language and art, to understand the views of others, and express one's own views effectively, confidently, to contribute to the community, to live as a responsible citizen in a democratic system. And so prior to Industrial Revolution, that was considered to be, the primary purpose of education. But with the early 19th century, early 1800s Industrial Revolution, that took a huge turn. The good thing was, education became accessible to a lot more people, and it has become more democratic. But the outcome of the education, unfortunately, it became to create docile and agreeable workers. Education was oriented towards industrial productivity. And so when that has happened, the original purpose took a huge shift. And today we continue to supply workforce to the industry. And many of us consider that to be the primary cause of education. But actually, the primary purpose of education has been very different: character formation and formation in basic virtues. Now, moving forward, added to the shift in the primary purpose of education, Indian education, we know we have a hangover of the colonial times, and that's a system that we have inherited from the colonial times. I believe most of you would certainly know this, famous Lord Macaulay's Minutes on Indian Education, 1835. Lord Macaulay, he was very prejudiced towards India and towards Indians. And he has famously said the purpose of education was actually to educate a class of Indians in blood and color, but British in taste and opinions and morals and intellect. And so he had looked down upon, our values, our education system. And he has even gone to the extent of saying that a single shelf of books in the Western world is even greater than all our literature and Arabic literature put together, And so their purpose was actually to, educate, prepare clerks and military men, merely, preparing workforce for the industry. And with that hangover, we continue to do the same, look at education to merely to get a job, skill development only towards, finding a job. And we seriously are bearing the consequences of that kind of an approach to education. And we have this great craze for learning medicine, engineering at the cost of other disciplines. You ask parents of students in high school, where do they want their kids to go? I'm sure at least 80 to 90% or even more would certainly say, I want my kid to be a doctor or an engineer. First option is doctor. If that's not possible, then an engineer. And so then what happens is, how about the other areas? We need people, we need great teachers, we need good carpenters, we need people who are skilled in everything else. We need good musicians, we need good sportsmen. And so this is not really a balanced approach to education and learning. And like I mentioned before, rote learning is a predominant way of teaching learning. And look at also the standardized testing. We certainly need to have some ways of determining whose intellect is better than the intellect of others. I understand the need of standardized testing, but the question here is, but is that the only way to determine our intellect? That's only one side of intellect that is being tested. That's not the only way intellect can be tested. People who are not really scoring very well in standardized testing are also really very, very intelligent in other ways. And so conformity is a serious issue that we face in this kind of an educational approach. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen this cartoon. This is a typical representation of our testing knowledge, right? So uniformity and conformity is not what our human mind is really wired for. You have an elephant and monkey, and you have fish and all the other animals, and if their intellect ability is going to be determined by their ability to climb a tree, I think we seriously have a problem. Okay, so for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam, please climb the tree. This, I believe, is some way a typical representation of our testing knowledge. I want to recommend to you, a couple of TED Talks. If you look for some of the highest viewed TED Talks on the internet, on YouTube, you would certainly find Sir Ken Robinson there. And his TED Talk on Do Schools Kill Creativity? He is one of the most popular TED Talks on the internet, on YouTube. In another TED Talk, How to Escape Education's Death Valley, he talks about 3 things that are really special about human beings. Number 1, that all human beings are naturally different and diverse. I'm sure among these 250 plus participants in this program, participants that are listening to me, there are many who are parents of more than one child. Now, ask yourself, if you have 2 children, are the 2 children the same in terms of intellectual ability, in terms of their skills, in terms of their different talents? I'm sure even identical twins, they're very, very diverse in the way they learn things, in the way they're wired, in the way their talents are. And so naturally, all of us are different and diverse. But unfortunately, our education demands a lot of conformity. Secondly, all human beings are inherently curious. This is what Sir Ken Robinson says. All human beings are inherently curious. I have this interesting personal experience. I'm originally from a remote village in Kerala, and I have my younger sister who lives in Delhi with her husband, with her family, with her husband and children. And once during a summer vacation, my nephew, he comes home and I also go home, and I take my nephew around, and he is very observant, and he's excited about everything that he sees because he lives in a city, and he had a lot of curious questions, a lot of questions that he asked. But one of the questions that I remember is, he asked this question, "Uncle, tell me, why are cows? Why is it that cows are different colors and all buffaloes are black? All buffaloes are black and cows are different colors." And he asked me this question: "Why is it that all buffaloes are black and cows are different colors?" Well, something that I haven't really paid attention to. I just had to say, well, that's an interesting question, great observation, but buffaloes are black and cows are different colors. That's the way it has always been. Now, when our students ask questions, when our kids ask questions, curious questions, if we say, well, don't ask stupid questions, well, they stop asking any question to ourselves. They stop being curious. Now, thirdly, all human beings are inherently creative. All human beings are inherently creative. Now, that's the reason why if we apply for a job, all of us submit our resumes, right? All of us submit our CVs. If we aren't creative, why is it that we need to submit our resumes? What is special about ourselves? What is a special contribution that I can make to this organization if I am hired? And that's the reason why we submit our resumes. But our dominant style is command and control. Very unfortunately, our dominant style is command and control. And our system, our education system, some way is educating kids out of their diversity, out of their curiosity, out of their creativity. I remember this funny and interesting T-shirt inscription that I have seen. Young man sporting this T-shirt on which this was inscribed: "I was born intelligent, but my education ruined me." I believe many of you may have seen this. "I was born intelligent, but my education has ruined me." And so why have we reduced education to mere industrial process? Why is it that we have removed the human element from education? Or the other significant question, are we teaching our students how to think or what to think? Unfortunately, we might be teaching them what to think. That is actually indoctrination. If we are teaching our students what to think, that is indoctrination. Indoctrination is not what is really expected in our education. We just need to open the door, open the mind so that they can begin to think for themselves. Now, why is critical thinking skills important? For skilled decision making and problem solving, which requires critical thinking skills. Now, for skill analysis and evaluation of our own emotions and values, all of us, we know, are products of our own cultures. We are products of our own circumstances. All of us have our own belief systems, and we hold on to our belief systems. All of us have our own biases. All of us have our own prejudices. And so, as teachers, to overcome them, we certainly need critical thinking skills. Now, also to encourage curiosity and to promote creativity, we certainly need critical thinking skills. And to form well-informed opinions, we certainly need critical thinking skills. So that we are not driven by assumptions, we are not driven by mere gut feeling. We don't say, this is true because I feel this is true. this is true because my gut feeling tells me that this is true. That's not the way an educator make judgments. And then to improve our relational skills. Why do I say we need critical thinking skills to improve our relational skills? Because we don't want to become judgmental about other people very especially who belong to other cultures, other nationalities, other religious beliefs, because we open ourselves to listen to them, we accommodate opinions that are different from ours. In other words, we are really open to receiving other people and accepting and learning from them. That way, we improve our relational skills through our ability to be critical thinkers. Now to a couple of definitions. What really is critical thinking? Let me first tell you what it is not. Critical thinking is not a synonym for criticizing. Some of us might think critical thinking is about being negative, about criticizing, about finding fault always with someone, the ideas of others. And in our own classes, we may find sometimes students who do this, you say anything, they have something to criticize. But that's not what critical thinking is all about. Here are two classical definitions, and we will go into the terminology that are used in these definitions. First of all, the careful critical thinking is the careful application of reason in the determination of whether a claim is true. Now, that's a definition given by Moore and Parker. Second definition, very close to the first one, critical thinking is judicious reasoning about what to believe and therefore what to do. That's a famous definition from Tittle. Now let's go into the different aspects of this definition. What are these different components of critical thinking? First of all, the first component I want to talk about is critical thinking is careful and intentional thinking. In other words, it's purposeful and deliberate thinking. If there is an argument, we want to know all parts of the claim. We just do not say, well, I agree or I disagree. We say, I agree because of this and this and this factors, because of these and these and these reasons. Or I disagree because of these and these and these reasons. Careful, intentional thinking, we're not driven by our emotions, our biases. It's not merely our gut feeling, our intuition. I'm not saying that we need to throw our gut feeling and intuitions out of the window, but we actually examine the pros and cons of an argument, and we make careful, we make studied judgment about things that are presented to us. And we also, if we disagree on something, we also look at what are these alternative arguments, the alternative possibilities. Secondly, another important component of critical thinking is using reason and logic. Use our logic. And thirdly, analyzing assumptions and biases. By analyzing our own assumptions and biases, all of us may have our own biases, our own stereotype. There are stereotypes. Being in the US, I have seen many Americans who believe that India is a land of snake charmers. And then I have to correct them and tell them, well, that's not the way it is. Or many of the Americans who believe all Indians, they eat spicy food. Or all Indians are, great IT people. Or we have another stereotype that, girls are bad in mathematics, and research has proven that otherwise. And so our own assumptions and biases, our own stereotypes, we try to remove them through evidence, through researched evidences, through studied results. We try to remove our assumptions and biases. And that's what critical thinking does. And we also, at a greater level, at a higher level, we apply our thinking to real world problems. Everything we learn is some way connected to our life. And that's why we have them in our syllabus. That's why our universities and colleges require us to learn this, because every area, every discipline, in the final account, ultimately, it has something to do with human life, our life in the world. And we certainly need to get our students to relate what they learn to the world outside, how this is going to be useful to them in the world out there. Okay, so these are the components of the critical thinking from the definition. Now, before I go forward, I said we will stop in the middle to listen to comments and responses. If Revati can let us know, we'll break for a few minutes, maybe for 5 to 7 minutes. And if there are any comments and responses that have already come in, can you please read out and let us know? Revati, are you there?
Yes, Father. Yeah, we can break for the comment session actually.
Okay, let's listen to you.
Yeah, just a second.
Okay.
One minute. No comments, right? Yeah. So there are no comments yet in the chat box. So I think the participants can unmute and maybe ask. Few of them have raised their hands. So
okay, they want to say something. I mean, you're most welcome. You're most welcome to.
Yeah.
We'll go with how many hands raised now?
There are four. Four of them have raised their hands.
Okay.
And Dr. Arul has messaged saying that he has sent you a question.
Can we take that question in the end, because I might be covering that?
Yes, I think we can.
If I haven't, I will take that question in the end.
Yes, yeah, we can do that at the end. So otherwise, participants, please, if you have any comments to discuss, you can unmute yourself and talk, or else we can go ahead, I think.
Those 4 hands that have gone up, and anyone among them wants to say something quickly, 2 minutes for each of them. Otherwise, I'll continue to go ahead.
Father, yeah, you can carry on. Yes.
All right. Okay. Now to the second part, as to how we can prepare ourselves to teach critical thinking skills. I believe is really important that we become self-reflective teachers, continually reflecting on what really went fine in our classes, what did not really work, how we can really improve ourselves. And that has to be part of our life as teachers. And I have found the second one, journal writing, a very important tool in becoming self-reflective teachers, self-evaluative teachers. Our own thought process, our interactions with the students, the challenges that we face on a regular basis, the methods that we use in our classes, and the effectiveness of those methods that we have used, all that continue to write on a journal. And I have seen research articles that have come from, individual journal writing of faculty members. And so this is something that I would encourage you to do. And we are lifelong learners. Newspapers, news channels certainly need to be, part of our everyday life. We observe things, we read and learn things, lifelong learners. The moment we stop learning, we stop to be educators. We have no right to be educators if we stop learning. Then questioning our own biases and prejudices, which I already spoke about. It's really important to be designing an engaging lesson plan. A lesson plan that has our learning outcomes, what we really want, where we really want our students to be at the end of the program. And we pause in between and ask ourselves, how far has this learning outcome been realized? And the methods and the effectiveness of these methods, the different methods that we might be using, design an engaging lesson plan. I would also encourage you to generate forums, in your own institutions or across the institutions where we can come together and share our innovative ideas, experiences, and collaborate, because nothing else is a great teacher like our experience. Faculty members who are, who have taught for many years, their experience, it's a rich learning resource. And if we can come together and share those ideas and experience, this is going to benefit each other. And then read, listen, and observe. And from the part of institutions, of course, long-term professional development program, so that we continue to catch up with everything that happens around and become lifelong learners. And so that is from the part of each of us to prepare to teach critical thinking skills, preparation that has to happen on a regular basis. Now to the other side, first I spoke about the preparation from our end. Now integrating critical thinking skills in teaching learning in our classrooms. I have a long list of things. I'm not going to go into all of these. Look at this list. We have a field trip, case study, brainstorming, problem solving, interactive lectures, project-based learning, higher level questions, oral presentations. We encourage our students to reflect on their experiences, small group activities, and creating an environment for idea exploration, stretching student thinking beyond the textbook. In other words, providing extra reading for them, prompting students to make arguments, hypotheses, debates to challenge pre-existing beliefs, reflecting on content and its connect to real world, encouraging students to find answers. I know now many of you would certainly tell me, of course, most of this we are doing. Of course, we are doing, and we need to ask ourselves how we can do them really better. I'm not really going to go into all this, but at least a couple of methods I really want to focus on. First of all, asking higher order questions. I believe that's a key to learning critical thinking. We can ask higher order questions. And I'm giving you an example here. Look at this first question here. Do you know what gender discrimination is? This question is a primary school level question. And a student who comes to higher education should certainly know what gender discrimination is. Now to the second question, what are the reasons for gender discrimination? The second question is a question to establish foundational knowledge. Okay, what are the reasons? What are the reasons for gender discrimination? Now go to the third one. Why do many claim that gender discrimination adversely impacts our society? And the third question certainly is an application question. And that question applies the knowledge that the student has really learned in question number 2. Now, think of a teacher who begins asking the third question directly. Without going to question number 2, think of a teacher who goes to question number 3 directly. Why do many claim that gender discrimination adversely impacts our society? And that question is going to confuse the students. We certainly need to go step by step. We certainly need to go into question number 2 before we go into question number 3. We tell them, we teach them, we give them the foundational knowledge before we go into the next level of applying that knowledge to the context, to the larger society, to the impact that gender discrimination has on our society. And so if you look into our many of our question papers, 80% at least 80% of the questions are level 1, 2, question number 1 and 2. Define, that is question number 1, and the reasons, question number 2. We don't have in our question papers many of these level 3 questions, application questions. Now, higher order questions, these are some of the words that you would often find for higher order questions. Critique, defend, examine, solve. It certainly involves personalizing what we have learned, what students have learned, analyzing, categorizing, debating, inferring, differentiating, compare and contrast. And so these are level 3, higher level questions. If we want to make our students critical thinkers, we certainly need to begin asking these higher order questions. Another important area we can help our students to be critical thinkers is by teaching them to be reflective. When I spoke about faculty members preparing for the classes, I spoke about being self-reflective. Now, onto the other side, being teachers, we certainly need to be teaching them to be reflective. I was in the United States for 5 years until I returned to India, a couple of months before. And part of our PhD program, we had, quite unlike the British system, we had 60 credit hours of classes. That is 20 papers, 20 full papers that we had to learn. And it took 2.5 to 3 years to go through learning all those papers before I could actually become a candidate for a PhD, a doctoral candidate. And now these 20 courses, 60 credit hours, 20 courses, all of them had at least 2 to 3 reflection papers. By reflection papers, they want only what you feel about it, what your experience is, what your argument is, what you have learned from the classes. They did not want the reference. They did not want what others are saying, entirely on what you think, your opinion, your experiences, how you're going to actually relate what you have learned to your profession. And so this is what they want. And I found that experience was really wonderful. Now, in our higher education, we certainly can do this, and we need to do this, helping our students to be reflective. Why not ask our students to write their opinion, and that becomes part of their assignment. And we can be very generous grading them because their opinion is not wrong. There is no reason an opinion can be wrong. And so I also recommend to you this famous book, Reflective Practitioner by Donald Scone. It talks about how reflectivity can actually help professionals become more effective. The Reflective Practitioner by Scone. Now, in giving assignment to our students for their self-reflection, reflection assignment, This could be some of the prompts that we can give, depending on what discipline that we are teaching, what discipline we're dealing with. For the social sciences, I thought this could be some of these prompts for reflection papers. You could ask them what has been their personal learning from this lesson. How did this lesson concern them? How did this make meaning to them? Well, if they agree with the arguments, agree or disagree, ask them to substantiate what they're saying. How will they make use of the learning in their future life? Or what could they do differently if they were to approach the same problem once again? So teaching them to be reflective will certainly go a great way, a long way in helping them to become critical thinkers and learners. Now, I want to present a few examples of how critical thinking can be applied in our own classrooms. This is one example that I often repeat. Take the example, imagine that you are teaching a Holocaust in a classroom. If you're merely teaching just facts and figures, we know history has it that over 6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust. 6 million Jews and a lot more other people. And if it is just about teaching facts and figures, kids can surely get it through a swipe of a cell phone today. And teachers are not required really to do that. If merely to teach facts and figures, then our job is very, very inadequate. We do a grossly inadequate job there. If you're teaching Holocaust, it's really important. It's more important to ask, why did many people believe that Hitler was right? There were a lot of Germans who believed what Hitler did was right. And so, why? Ask this question. Why is it that a lot of people, how could public opinion be formed? How does this fascism and opinion formation work in the world? How did it work at that time? How is the same really working in the world today? And so you approach an event, a historical event like Holocaust, from many dimensions, from many perspectives, from many sides. It can be looked at from the human behavior. If you're a psychology teacher, then you have plenty of stuff to discuss and talk about. You approach it from the human behavior, or discussions on racism, which is even now a huge problem in the world. The question of anti-Semitism. I talked about the fascism, dictatorship, democracy, ethics and morals, building narratives, and political parties do it, different religious organizations do it. Then a lot of discussions on how hegemony, discussion, philosophy, hegemony and dominance, how is that formed in the world? And after all those discussions, you begin to apply it to fascism and opinion formation in the world today. What are these, powers that are, bordering on dictatorship in the world today? Why is there so much of forcible suppression of opposition in the world? Why are certain people not really tolerant to the opinions of others? A lot of discussion that can ensue when you really teach a historical event like the Holocaust. That's one example. Let me also cite you a couple of other examples. I've been an English teacher for a while. If you're teaching literature and arts, we know literature is not merely about stories of, it's not merely about stories, but these stories are of human conflicts. And in human conflicts, there would always be an oppressor and another one who is oppressed. And traditionally, we approach educating stories in human literature, very especially in our country, through caste and class and gender, race and sexual orientation. And after discussion, we certainly begin to relate the event, the story that we have learned to the world out there. And if you are a history teacher, history is not merely about names and dates that you learn. There is this famous book, Whose History Is It Anyway? History writing is certainly a perspective. You know this famous saying from Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius: everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Now, if you are if you catch up with the news and newspapers, every time a new political party takes over the reins in our country, have you heard they really want to change the history books in our classrooms? Why do they do that? So there is no objectivity in history writing. History writing is a perspective. Now, take the example of Indian Mutiny of 1857. We also call that Sepoy Mutiny. And when Indians are really written that part of our independence struggle, we have elevated this event to be a major event in our freedom struggle. But that's not the way the British have written, the same story. And so the British perspective is very different. The number of British men who have been killed in that event, from their perspective, is a lot lesser than what our Indian history books carry. And so history writing is certainly a perspective. And whose history is it anyway? And we certainly need to ask that critical question, not only in history and literature, but in every aspect, every topic that we teach our kids. And we teach them to learn things that way, to critically look at things. Now, look at this example. Suppose you are teaching COVID-19 today. How are we going to teach it? Are we going to look at the number of people who have died? Millions have died already, or the millions that are affected, the number of people who have lost their jobs. That data is really important. But more importantly, I believe there are things that this event really teaches us, that we are globally so interconnected, that we as human beings are super social creatures. And then we also reflect, and then there is this reorganization of what is essential to us and what is non-essential. We know weddings can be conducted with 20 people, 30 people now, events that had happened, with hundreds of people. Now, also ask our students to look at what could be the post-COVID scenario. Some of you are, if you are economics teachers, then you may know there is this thought about the Great Reset, and the next Global Economic Forum, GEF, really wants to discuss this. Post-COVID, the Great Reset. They're looking at how balance for the world can be relooked, post-COVID. Can we bring in more equity in the distribution of wealth post-COVID? And so there is this great reset that is really coming up. So post-COVID scenario, how is the world going to be different in the post-COVID scenario is certainly a question we can ask our students. At the global level, we need to reorder. This could be another learning, another lesson. At the global level, we need to reorder our priorities, invest more in scientific and medical research for the larger human good than in weapons of violence and destruction. Okay, that could be another lesson that we learn from this. And more importantly, who are real heroes in our lives? Are these movie and sports stars, or are the real heroes people who selflessly serve by risking their lives, people who are on the front line, the medical professional, doctors and nurses, and a lot more people? Are they not the real heroes in our lives? So that could be one way of looking at how we can teach COVID-19. I'm sure many of you will have this question: is critical thinking possible in all disciplines? My answer to that, my straightforward answer to that question is yes, because all disciplines that we teach are either directly or indirectly related to human life. If there is anything that is not related to human life, then we shouldn't be teaching it and we shouldn't be learning it. And so if you're taking the example of history, history is to reflect on the past so that it can enlighten our present and future. In the case of anthropology, it is to learn how diverse human societies are and learn from that diversity. Literature arts, to learn empathy and to see the world through different lenses. And science, certainly to understand the deeper, understand deeper the world that we live in, the mystery that we experience in the world, and find scientific explanation, explore the mysteries of the world through science. And so take any example for that matter. Take the example of statistics for that matter. Those are not mere numbers. Those numbers really matter to human life. These numbers, if you're taking the case of accounting for that matter, is about making both ends meet, right? Tally and balancing, it's about making both ends meet. And making both ends meet really matters to the human world. And so depending on what area you are teaching, where you are, what your expertise is, you will be the person to determine how you'll be able to get your students to think higher level, deeper, and relate that to the world out there. Relate that to the discipline and to the world out there. Now, there are challenges in teaching critical thinking skills. First of all, teaching critical CTS, critical thinking skills, it's a lifelong project, and there is no ready-made blueprint for it. Because we are all teaching different disciplines, the demands of our creativity are different in different fields. And so we will be the best person to determine how we can approach what we teach. We would be the best persons to determine our learning ability, at what level our students are, and then accordingly impart the lesson to them. And so there is no ready-made blueprint. We certainly need to be continuous learners in doing this. Secondly, all of us are also, like I mentioned, products of our own culture, our own societies. We have cultural barriers, social conditioning and stereotyping. Indian society, we know, scores very high on power distance. What do I mean by power distance? You know, we have kids, students who have high regard and respect for the students' general terms, generally. And so some of them find it hard even to ask questions. They think, you know, sometimes even asking a question could be a sign of disrespect towards the teacher. And that can be a cultural barrier, a social barrier. Even after encouraging our kids to ask questions, you might find not many of them really come forward to ask those questions. So we have those cultural barriers. We also have this temptation for groupthink. If I think differently, if I express my opinion very different from the others, I might be rejected. Okay, and so I'm tempted to groupthink, think like others. Now that's a temptation. And then overcoming our personal biases is a problem. We certainly need to keep it away. I'm a priest. I belong to a religious organization, and when I teach, you know, English in my classes, if I carry the positions of my religious belief as regards LGBTQ into my classes, then I'm not really doing a fair job. That's not what I'm supposed to teach in a class, in an English language class, in a democratic secular setup. And so I need to keep away, you know, my personal biases, my affiliation, so that I become a more critical teacher. Sometimes teachers can be very arrogant and intolerant. They feel threatened by students asking questions, and they would say, that's a stupid question, sit down. I'm not going to entertain that stupid question. That is arrogance and intolerance. We might also find a lot of discouragement, lack of support from our own institutions. That could be one case. There is, of course, schedule pressure. We are supposed to cover the syllabus within a period of time. What a language, cover the syllabus. I believe we are supposed to uncover the syllabus. The schedule pressure is something many of us really go through. And then we also make ourselves vulnerable, don't we? When we ask our students, when we encourage our students to ask questions, say, for example, there are times we need to admit we do not know, that we do not know. And it certainly needs a certain amount of humility to accept that we do not know, that we are also learning along with our students, that we did not know everything, that we are not actually walking encyclopedias, and to admit that we really do not know. And that way we are making vulnerable. And in research, of course, there are measuring difficulties in research as regards CTS, critical thinking skills. I spoke about measuring difficulties. One of the last slides I want to present before we could go into question and responses is to provide a list of instruments, if some of you are interested to pursue this and look at doing some research in this area, quantitative research. These are some instruments. These instruments are not freely available. You certainly need to spend money and buy these instruments. If you're really interested in doing pursuing further research, these could be some of the instruments like WGCTA, Watson Glaser Critical Thinking Appraisal. There is a Cornell Critical Thinking Test. There is California Critical Thinking Disposition Inventory, California Critical Thinking Skills Test, Holistic Critical Thinking Scoring Rubric. Some of the leading instruments that are available for you to do research, quantitative research, if you really want to do it. That's about my presentation. So over to Revati now, if you have comments and questions, we could listen to it now.
Yes, Father. Just give me a second. I'm just going through the questions. We have few questions. I think you can take them together because I feel they're related kind of. One is, what changes is required in the syllabus to develop critical thinking skill? And how do we help students understand the importance of critical thinking and reasoning on a day-to-day basis? And how to motivate the students to develop their critical thinking? I think you can take them all together, I guess.
I don't think we really need a lot of change in the syllabus. In a syllabus that is given to us, if you are faculty members who really exercise reflection and critical thinking, you will be able to incorporate elements of critical thinking into the syllabus that is provided to you. I gave you the example of different areas, different stories for that matter. Like you mentioned before during the session, you teach story at the first level as a story, but then you begin to examine what this story really means to the world out there. So how are you able to relate the story to the events that are happening out there? And so one thing that we really need to do is to find connections, interconnections. Our disciplines are interconnected. Unfortunately, in our education system, we compartmentalize things, don't we? A student who learns science subjects learns only science subjects. And with our new education policy that is coming up, I'm really glad that might change, and that really needs to change. And a student who learns science subject should certainly learn certain subjects in humanities, in arts, in social sciences, so that the person becomes a holistic, all-rounded person. And so that is a welcome change, And so a student who learns commerce, learns not only commerce, begins to learn certain areas of psychology, certain areas of sociology. A person who learns both commerce and sociology will easily be able to connect those numbers and commerce into the problems of the world around him or her. That's the way I see it. Any syllabus that is given to you, you certainly can approach it from the critical perspective. Okay.
Thank you, Father. We have one more question. It's related to the one that you just answered. How to assess the critical thinking skills?
Good question. I mentioned
and also, sorry to cut you off. If you could take one more question along with that, I think this is also related to the same. How positive psychology is connected to critical thinking skill?
Positive psychology. Well, I'm not. Good question. I'm not an expert in psychology, but how do you teach students critical thinking? The definition I mentioned, it's not about criticizing. It's not about being negative. It's about finding facts and figures. It is about making our judgments studied. It's about seeing the world from a different lens. It's about looking at alternatives. It's about seeing one reality from different perspectives, and we need to do it positively. If you are a journalism teacher, I'm just citing this example. If you're a journalism teacher, one of the exercises that you could certainly give to a student is look at 4 or 5 leading newspapers, leading national newspapers of our country, and ask that student to take the leading news of that particular day and keep these papers side by side and ask the student to look at one newspaper, what is it that they have written? Look at the second newspaper, same news, how have they covered it? What are the things that they have omitted from it? What are the additional things that they have written? Do it with 4 or 5 newspapers and then ask the student to determine what is the political position of this newspaper. Why have they omitted certain things? Why have they added different things? It's not merely about being positive. It's also being about making the right judgment, an informed judgment. That's the way I say it. Unfortunately, I'm not really, I'm not able to talk about positive psychology. If there is someone in the group who can actually enlighten us from the psychology perspective, I welcome you to do so. If there is a psychology faculty who can enlighten us on that question, can someone do that? We have a few more minutes if they really want to talk about.
Participants can unmute yourself and talk, or if you want to say something, you can also type it down on the chat.
Hello.
Do you have any other questions or comments or anything else?
Hello.
Yes.
Am I audible, Father? Actually, there's someone in the
yes.
who's put this up. I think it must be a psychology faculty. And I think he's also right. He's saying one way of probably stimulating critical thinking in psychology is using case study analysis. I think he's also asking, is there anything, any other way that
Or,
we could implement this?
okay, that sounds good. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for putting that up. Case analysis, you take a positive scenario, look at what really has happened, how that situation has emerged. There could be many ways of what are the theories that are involved there, how the same scenario can be replicated in another situation. Those could be possibilities. Okay. If
Other, can we take one last question?
oh, sure.
Okay. So when we use critical thinking in teaching, could we engage the students in stimulus variation and reinforcement skills also?
Great question. My straightforward answer is yes. You certainly need to encourage. Sometimes you might find certain questions may lack clarity, certain questions may not be the most brilliant questions, but you certainly need to encourage those questions. And it's enough even to say, I'm glad you raised that question, and it's a wonderful question. And you ask the student to talk more about it, what that person's opinion is, and then you throw that same question to the whole class and ask them to respond to it, or you divide them into different groups and respond to that question. We certainly need to encourage students to do it, and that's a great approach, a great way to encourage critical thinking in our classes. What is important is the question, very especially the question why. And you may not have one single answer to a question. There could be many answers to the same question, and we certainly need to welcome those many answers. And these many answers could also be right answers for that matter. Some of these answers can be wrong answers as well. Then we ask, so why do you think this answer is wrong? And so the important thing is actually to raise that question. That question has answer in itself, and my answer is certainly affirmative. We certainly need to encourage our students to do that and reward them for the question that they ask. And if you have the power to reward them through their internal assessment and all that, please do that. Please do that and tell them, because you have raised this question, I'm going to reward you for your internal assessment. That'll be a great way to do it.
We have one more question. I think we'll take this one question and wind up the quiz session. What to believe and what not to believe? Does belief contribute to critical thinking?
What to believe and what not to believe? Very interesting. And all of us are, products of our own belief system, aren't we? We have our cultural beliefs, we have our religious beliefs. Now, say for example, you might know there are cricketers who think, if who have certain rituals and practices that they believe. All of us, I believe, have our rituals and practices. Now, to us, they make meaning, don't they? Sachin Tendulkar, he used to believe that he has to tie his right part first. And so it said that he used to keep the right part ready first. And he believed he would do well only if he ties his right part first. Or some of us, if you drive, we don't actually put our car on the reverse gear as we begin. We want actually to take the car forward at least a few inches before we put our car on reverse. And so, there are sometimes these beliefs that we have, and beliefs are, those are particular to individuals. Now, as teachers, we cannot actually take our belief to the classroom and then say, well, you need to believe this. We certainly need to open the minds of the students and encourage them to look at their own beliefs, encourage them to look at their own cultural beliefs, encourage them to look at their own religious beliefs, and help them to see things rationally and independently and make their own judgments. And we won't have to be saying to people that your beliefs are wrong, my belief is true, and that is the real cause for fundamentalism in our country and elsewhere in the world today, right? And so what to believe, what not to believe, we'll have to leave that to each individual. And our job as teachers is actually to open our mind, help our students to open their minds and look at things independently, look at things critically. And that's what education is all about. Okay, I hope I have answered that question.
Okay, we don't have any more questions, but we have a request from G. Tangarajesh. He had requested if we could allow him to ask a question.
Okay, please.
Mr. Tangarajesh, sir, if you could unmute yourself and please ask the question. Are you there, sir? Tangarajesh?
Yeah. Yes,
sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Sir, thank you, sir, for a wonderful presentation. Regarding this encouragement of discussion among students, sometimes the discussion, critical thinking reaches a political tone. The students take two different parties and they become very tense. So that is one drawback I think we have. It changes the atmosphere. One student taking this party and another student taking the name of that party. So it becomes a kind of a very battlefield kind of thing. So it is very difficult to manage. This one question. Another question, second question is some students are of attitude that they say we don't want this kind of thinking. We don't want this kind of discussion. Only stick to the syllabus. We don't want this kind of attitude. I find very discouraging, sir. How to tackle?
Okay. Now to the first question, political discussions in the classroom.
Yeah.
That's where I think our role as animators, that's a significant role that we have to play. We will have to tell them it's not about playing political parties in our classrooms. I understand what you're saying. Sometimes it can be heated debates. You can have debates based on facts and figures. We do not encourage partisan politics in our classrooms. Now, even we as teachers, for that matter, I have seen in the social media sometimes, faculty members, they let the whole world know what their political leniency is, what their political ideology is. I, as a teacher, I wouldn't encourage that. As a teacher, you are a public figure, and your political ideology, your political leniency, your affiliation to a political party, that is your personal thing. And you should make sure that you do not bring that into the classroom. That is from your personal side. And discussions and debates go beyond our control, that is when we say enough is enough. We are not going to take this forward, and we do not want this kind of partisan discussion. We don't want bad blood in the classroom. And so that job is our teacher's responsibility. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
What is the second thing that
second one is some students are of attitude that they say stick to the syllabus. We don't want discussion or we don't want critical thinking. They say only sticking to the syllabus. This was very frustrating kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, by critical thinking, we are not really going out of the syllabus for that matter. Okay, we certainly the syllabus. Sticking to the syllabus is not about by hearting what is given in the syllabus. We are approaching the syllabus from different perspectives. And so if you have a question, an analytical question, if you have a question on creating something from the syllabus. So how are you going to answer that? That's what I'm talking about. And so we are not merely going out of the syllabus. Of course, we certainly can provide additional readings and all that. And so, I know many of our students do not want to do that. They just want to mug up and then come and deliver and spit it out on the paper. That is, I know this is overnight, things are not really going to change. I think as teachers, it's a struggle, it's a challenge, it's a process. You know, it can be really very frustrating, but we shall never stop, you know, doing the extra thing. And for every one or two, you know, every three student who doesn't want an extra reading, and there could be one or two other students who welcome it. And so look at those students, take encouragement from those students who really want to learn more. In a class of say 50 or 60 students, there could be at least 10 students who welcome this. And if they do that, I think our job is done, right? I don't expect all the 50 and 60 in a classroom to welcome, you know, additional readings and critical thinking and extra work and all that. If you have 10 of them, I think your job is done. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Take heart from those students. And I that, you know, for every three or four, you know, students who do not welcome this, you may have one
Yes,
student who wants more, who is in the class, open eyes, open mouth, you know, wants more.
yes, sir.
Go ahead. I think there our job is done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much, Father.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah, actually, we have like a lot of questions. I just took all, there are so many questions that had repeated also. So I just took all the ones that we felt we really need to have like more discussions on. And I can see the inbox is flooding with appreciation on your presentation, the way you have explained everything in simple terms. And
Thank you so much.
yeah, due to the time constraint.
Asking questions, right?
Yeah, but I think it was all intended to you. I mean, everyone is like sending messages. I could read. They all are like overwhelmed with the way you have presented your PPT, the way you explained things. Yeah, so it's my privilege to extend my sincere gratitude to you, Dr. Thomas Thennadiyil, on behalf of the entire Department of Humanities at Claret College. Thank you so much, Father, for this insightful session and patiently answering all the queries to each and every single participant. I'm certainly sure that all the participants will agree with me on this, that you had like such impressive PPTs which were quite very engaging, and you well elaborated every single point with suitable examples that we all could relate to. Due to the time constraints, I don't think we can exceed to further discussions. And from the bottom of my heart, on behalf of every single participant here, thank you so much for your time, and thanking all the fellow participants for making today's session a success. Please fill out the feedback form before you leave, and we will see you all tomorrow at sharp 3 p.m. Have a great evening. Father, if you could say a few words, please.
Thank you so much. This has been encouraging, and we have a big number of participants. Thank you for inviting me to do this, and I encourage you all to be learners, to continue to be learners, and we have this huge responsibility to mold a new generation of critical thinkers, and more than ever, our nation, our society needs them. So thank you all, and God bless.
Thanks a lot, Father. Thank you for your time. Participants, please make sure you all fill in the feedback form and the attendance link before you leave the session. And looking forward to see you all tomorrow, sharp at 3 p.m. Have a great evening, all of you.